From the nation's capital, the McLaughlin Group, an unrehearsed program presenting inside opinions and forecasts on major issues of the day.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group. GE. From residential to commercial lighting, we bring good things to life.
Here's the moderator, John McLaughlin.
Issue 1, the post-Soviet world. In the past weeks, George Bush and Bill Clinton have been talking a lot about the post-Soviet world. With the death of the Soviet Union, the United States has been left as the undisputed leader of the planet. Here's some of what's ahead for the U.S. in that leadership role. 1, in the Persian Gulf, even though the Allied forces won an incredible victory, Saddam Hussein was not crushed. Instead, the despotic Iraqi leader has been rebuilding both his military might, including nuclear, and his political base. This expansionism has rekindled international irritation and worry. 2, in the former Yugoslavia, the bloody war rages on. 3, in the former Soviet Union, civil disorder is rampant. Corruption, crime, political and economic upheaval. In Somalia, civil war has torn that country apart, with 2,000 dying every day from starvation. The death toll now estimated to soon reach a staggering 1.5 million. 5, in North Korea, Iran, and Pakistan, nuclear weapons either exist or are just around the corner, bringing the total number of nations with the bomb to 15. Question, how has the U.S., under George Bush, handled its newfound responsibilities in the post-Soviet world, and who is showing himself to be the better suited to meet these challenges and others in the years ahead? Bush or Clinton? I ask you, Ben Wattenberg, and thanks for sitting in for Freddie the Beetle Bonds. As you know, Freddie is the Beetle, so you will be acting Beetle, and I will refer to you as Ben Watten Beetle. How's that?
That's
you got all that?
Yeah, that's
so corny. It's not.
That's great, John. Thank you. President Bush has been doing fairly well in foreign policy, in my judgment, sort of a B plus kind of presidency. I think he blew it on the great wave of democracy. He was a good Cold War president, a good end of the Cold War president, has not been a great pro-democracy president. I think Clinton has it within him because Democrats make good idealists, good Wilsonians. The 1990s are the decade of purveying democracy rather than simply defending it as in the Cold War. Clinton could be a great democracy purveyor.
Eleanor, Clift.
I don't think that's going to be a winning slogan, vote for me, because I'm a purveyor. I hope he doesn't use it.
Well, you figure out how to say it in American, Eleanor. But Americans love the idea that we stand for something great.
Well, I agree.
It's a great issue.
The organizing principle for George Bush so far has been the status quo, and he's done pretty well at keeping the lid on things. But I think what's missing is vision and coherence. And I think in replacing anti-communism in the country, you're right, we're yearning for a new organizing principle, whether it's environment, economy, maybe even human rights, which was so discredited under Jimmy Carter. There is a real opening here for Bill Clinton or somebody to develop a morality-based foreign policy that the American people can really rally around.
And the magic word is democracy.
Clarence, what do you think?
Well, I think
Don't you think George Bush has led us through a difficult and dangerous time?
He has,
the Soviet
indeed.
coup.
But you know, well, you're absolutely right, but at the same time, in his strength, you can see his weakness. His strength is as a crisis manager. His weakness, as Eleanor has said, is that he's not a visionary. He's not a Wilsonian, Ben, as you alluded to. He's not a man with a vision for what this new world order is all about. We look and we see that he popularized a phrase, but there's no order to this new world. There's no direction. There's no consistency. He can react to a crisis where America's national interests are obvious, as in the Gulf War situation. But what about the former Yugoslavia or the current Somalia? We Americans do want to be about something important, but what are we about in this?
Do you want to give Bush any credit for, say, leading us through the difficult time accompanying German reunification? Do you get credit for that?
That is what Ben said. The post-Cold War endgame he was great on, and I think up to that point it was the fulfillment of his life. But after that, look, he was slow in recognizing the threat of Saddam Hussein, and he was slow to react after the war. He was great during the war, during the Gulf War. He was slow on Bosnia. He was slow on aid to Russia, slow on aid to Eastern Europe. Terrible on Haiti, terrible on Haiti. Very good Haiti. Very good on the Middle East peace negotiations. good on trade. You know, he's a free trader.
How about Panama? You give him credit for Panama?
I give him credit for Panama, which was part of the old...
Okay,
the old
looking towards the future. I know we're all focusing for the future. We're saying Bush is okay for the past, but what about the future?
Okay, now, Clinton has come along. Clinton knows nothing about foreign policy, comes along and says, I would do better on all these areas. Everything depends, because Clinton is going to be a domestic policy president, on who he picks as Secretary of State, who's going to be doing the most of the work. If he picks Steve Solars or somebody who's an activist in foreign policy, great. If he picks one of these Carter administration retreads, then you're going to have a
This is
I want to ask Bill.
You forgot the magic word in your list, which is China. Bush has been amoral on China policy.
I agree.
But Mort, would you agree that Clinton's instincts were good in Yugoslavia when he talked about how we need to go in there and get some involvement with air cover?
Yeah,
Bush played
instincts were
catch-up.
good, but it was easy. It was easy to have your instincts be good. The question is, what are you actually going to do?
Well, it's
Nobody's
easy.
doing anything.
Don't you think that Bill Clinton is a little bit unconvincing when he portrays himself as to the right of George Bush? This is a man, you know this better than I do, since you founded the Coalition for a Democratic Majority, which was the forerunner of the neocons, who, by the way, are leaving the Bush camp and fleeing in droves. Your buddies, Penn Kimball and the others, right?
Right.
And you're surprised that you didn't sign this piece of paper that appeared in the newspaper, though, did you? I don't
John,
see your name here.
I
I see Moravcik, I see Shifter, Huntington, Nitze. I don't see what.
He has a
Why
list
did you
in his
sign?
hand right here.
I feel like I'm at some far-right organizing meeting here, pulling out the opposition papers.
No, these neocons have moved over behind your pal, Bill Clinton.
Some of them have.
And I'm saying, in 1972, when you founded the Coalition for a Democratic Majority, who was campaigning in Texas at the time for George McGovern, which is why you founded that group?
Stop badgering the witness.
Who was?
The answer to your question is Bill Clinton. The answer to your earlier question is I am a retroactive virgin in these matters. I am on Mount Olympus looking down on the players in my role as a commentator.
Here's a guy who said he was against the Vietnam War. He campaigns for George McGovern. He fudges his draft at best, and some would say beyond that. And now he's pretending he's got this efflorescence of hair on his chest.
Have you
John,
matured?
you're not
Let him finish. Let him finish.
Have you matured in the last 20 years?
Well, have I moved?
Out of there.
The answer is no.
I'm not going to make any of those admissions.
And we don't want to see the hair on your chest either.
Are you persuaded that running to the right of Bush on, for example, the Persian Gulf, that he's persuasive?
Yeah, I think the thing he's not persuasive on, I mean, he wants to draw down the military budget more than I and some of those people on that ad would prefer.
Not by much, 5% more.
Well,
that's
okay,
not much.
but that's a process in motion. But on the other issues, and particularly on this idea that Eleanor and I were talking about, on the idea of vigorously and assertively promoting democracy around the world, he's got the music right and the words right, and it would be in his political best interest to really pursue it.
And he's playing all these issues exactly right. He's supporting the commander-in-chief, and you cannot hang George McGovern around Bill Clinton's neck. That is 20 years ago.
Thank you for calling that to my attention, Eleanor. Let's get out. Who's ahead on the foreign policy issue now, Clinton or Bush now?
Oh, Bush is ahead now. I mean, look at the polls. He's
Who's ahead now, Eleanor?
Bush is marginally ahead, but it's certainly
Clarence.
competitive.
Bush is supposed to be ahead, and he is ahead, but he needs more than that.
Bush is ahead.
Bush is ahead. Who's going to be ahead November the 3rd, quickly?
Probably Bush, but tight.
What do you think, Eleanor?
Well, are we declaring who's going to win the election?
No.
Or are we
Who's going to be ahead on the
dividing
foreign policy issue?
Well, I think if we vote solely on foreign policy, it's George Bush's.
Even in November. What do you think?
I don't think we're voting on foreign policy, though, so it won't matter. But yeah, Bush will be ahead.
What do you think?
I agree with Clarence.
The answer is no. In November and today, Bush is ahead. Issue 2, the health care challenge. The presidential contenders have squared off on the pressing issue of national health care. George Bush's plan includes these elements. 1, the poor. That is a family of 4 earning $15,000 a year or less. They would get vouchers to buy private sector health insurance up to $3,750 worth. 2, middle-income Americans, that is, families earning $15,000 to $18,000 annually, will get tax deductions for health care. 3, the self-employed will get tax deductions for 100% of their monthly health care premiums. Cost, $20 billion on average per year, each year for 5 years, to be paid for by a variety of spending cuts and reforms. But no new taxes, so says Mr. Bush. Bill Clinton favors a pay-or-play plan under which, 1, the poor and unemployed would get publicly funded insurance for basic health care. 2, lower-income Americans, namely those within the $15,000 to $28,000 income range, will get government subsidies to buy private health insurance. 3, employers, they will be required either to pay or play, namely to buy private health insurance for workers, play in other words, or to pay into a government-run program, which government program will probably have to be underwritten by the employer, who will be forced to pay a 7% tax to the federal government on his business's total annual payroll. Cost unspecified. Question, which of these plans is better, and who is winning on the health care issue? I ask you, Morton.
You are to be congratulated, John. That presentation is more than the American people have heard about health care in this campaign. Partly because the Bush administration has done such a terrible job of flacking its own plan, and partly because the American press has totally ignored the fact that Bush even has a health care plan. Frankly, I think that before we go into huge government management of the health care system in this country, we ought to try a plan like the Bush plan, which is based in the private sector, and it is also, one of the things that you didn't include was a lot of reforms in administration and cost cutting and spreading out the requirement that all businesses be covered, large or small, be covered on a community standard under the Bush plan. It's much better, it's much less costly, it's much more private than the Clinton plan, and I think it's better. But nobody knows about it.
Well, the reason nobody knows about it is the president never said a word about it after he proposed it. He has not fought for it on Capitol Hill. It is basically tax incentives. It's a charade.
It's not a charade.
When he sends it up, he'll probably tie it to a capital gains tax cut.
It is not a charade.
George Bush has not been serious about health care reform, and I think what this issue is going to come down to is who the American people believe will deliver.
This whole stuff about that the president hasn't been, quote, serious, and he hasn't pushed it. Look, he has half a dozen programs that basically, in the domestic arena, healthcare is one, education is another. There are a number of others that make a lot of sense. He has put them forward in a mildly assertive way. He hasn't fought for them tooth and nail, but he has them. Everything that Mort said is correct, including his indictment of the media. The media has been so far behind the curve because Bush hasn't put a red ribbon, and Bush. It's
Ben,
Bush's
you're being too kind to Bush and too mean to the media.
Let me
just put a little something in here. When you say mild to moderate support, he's been more concerned about bashing Bill Clinton than he has in presenting his own positive programs. You know, the polls show 90% of the people do care about this issue, but he hasn't really pushed it.
What do you mean? What does this really pushed it mean? I mean, he proposed it.
He hasn't talked about cost control, and he hasn't talked about how he's going to pay for it. Those are two big questions.
Because his program goes to people rather than companies, and the cost control comes from the magic of the market.
His program goes to the insurance company.
The tax credits and vouchers go to human beings. And that is where you get the ultimate market control in theory.
This isn't an AEI seminar.
Well, it ought to be.
We get a chance to speak
You'd get it right if it
also.
was, right.
The president cobbled together a health care proposal for the State of the Union speech simply to diffuse it as an issue. He didn't even send up a proposal for months. I don't think the tax incentives is even on Capitol Hill.
What do you think about this? Can we talk about one of the, I want to talk about one.
He didn't talk about how to pay for it, and he didn't draft legislation. That's called cobbling.
The fact is that the Democrats don't have a plan either. The Democrats control the Congress. They have been fighting with each other over play or pay versus the Canadian plan. They don't have a plan either.
They have an assortment of plans.
Bush has a better plan. Bush
Get
has
your
a full
finger
plan.
out of my face, please. Thank you.
Oh, my God.
There you go. I want to make a point.
Whoever is president will do something.
In Sweden today, there is a conservative government. In Germany, they also want to get rid of their health program because they simply cannot support it. It's too expensive. Likewise in France, likewise in England, and it's a big drain on the economy in Canada. But Sweden and the European countries are fed up with anything that resembles a government-operated national health insurance program. They don't want it. And that's why they have restored conservatism to Sweden. An important lesson for us. Can't we learn anything from other countries? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, of course I understand what you're saying. And the Clinton plan, believe me, will go to government health care, because instead of the more and more employers will opt to put their employees in the public pool, and you will have, at the end of 10 years, and a lot of people favor it, a Canadian-style system.
Well,
And that's
Can
the
we
choice
get out?
we've got.
Let's get out. Who's winning the health care issue now? Would you say Benjamin Wattenbeetle? By the way, you're giving a bad example because you're not responding to my request that you acquiesce, because Eleanor now is getting agitated.
She's mad at me, not them.
Well, please continue. Please continue. You've got into bad habits since you've been off this program. Please continue.
Thank you. Right now, Clinton is winning the health care.
Who's going to win November 3rd?
I think Bush will. I think he will make the case that this is governmentalized, socialized medicine. There's enough truth there to make it
Which really
stick.
goes to the larger undergirding issue of this campaign is, whom do you trust with change? Does Clinton too far out, or is Bush too little? What do you think?
Well, Bush is going to try to scare the American people into thinking that there'll be some government takeover on health care, but Bush's scare tactics are not going to work. Clinton's going to win on health
today
care
and
easily.
it's Clinton's November? What do you say?
I think Clinton's ahead on this issue, as with other domestic
How about
issues.
November?
Bush really comes too late to this issue, I think, to win over public confidence. And Clinton's
What
got
do you
a great
think,
defense.
Mort?
Bush has done so terrible a job of selling his own program that Clinton will continue to dominate it.
You do? You think so? I think I'm with you. I think that he can take this back, because I think that the broader consideration of who to trust with change will sweep into this area too. Issue 3, looking ahead to '96. The GOP convention in Houston last month has inspired early speculation, believe it or not, about the 1996 Republican presidential race. Here are the contenders listed arbitrarily. Dan Quayle, Vice President; James Baker, White House Chief of Staff; Pat Buchanan, columnist, McLaughlin Group maven, and defeated '92 challenger; Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense; Phil Gramm, Texas Senator and convention keynoter; Jack Kemp, HUD Secretary; William Bennett, former drug czar; Carol Campbell, Governor of South Carolina; William Wells, Governor of Massachusetts; Pete Wilson, Governor of California. Give us the early handicap on these potential contenders, Eleanor Clift.
Well, if George Bush wins a second term, Dan Quayle has 4 years to remake his image, but I don't think that's long enough. Pat Buchanan reminded us at the convention, while he will never be president, he's too polarizing. I think he knows it. I don't think he'll run. I think the hope of the Republican Party is with Jack Kemp and William Weld. Kemp has a sentimental hold on the Reagan Democrats. He reaches out. He cares about the cities. He's an inclusive Republican rather than one of these hate-mongerers. And William Weld represents the future. He's pro-choice. He advocates gay rights. He's where this country is going rightfully.
Well, but with regard, let's talk about Kemp for a little bit. Do you think Kemp has the ambition to go all the way? Do you think he's got the fire in his belly? You know how the stop-start thing sets in with Kemp?
Yeah, but I think he's got...
I think he's matured since '88 in terms of handling himself strategically. On the issues, he is the Republican conservative that Democrats like, that liberals like to some degree, except on the abortion issue.
Yeah, he is the Democrats' favorite Republican, but I'm not sure he is so pro-black, you know, that I'm not sure that Republicans in general will like him that much, because they do tend to be
fairly white.
I think the candidate to watch. Now, the question is
William Weld.
No, Carol Campbell. He's a Southerner. He's a conservative. He's, honest to God, he's the middle of the road. He and Dick Cheney are the contenders, the dark horse contenders.
They're both the vice presidential material.
Jack Kemp could win the election of 1992 in a landslide. And if we were ever able to sort of construct a schematic of where the parties are heading, the Democratic Leadership Council wing of the Clinton Party and the sort of Opportunity Society wing of the Republican Party is where mainstream America meets, and there is some consensus, although with some differences, and right at the point of that is Jack Kemp, and he's got the fire in his belly, and I think he's going to get nominated.
Moderate thinking Republicans are so offended as to what has happened to this party when they watched Houston that, to use Mort's phrase, I think to be pro-black is not a sin, and I think that that's going to be a positive. That's a real positive that Jack Kemp has.
Clarence, by the way, thanks for sitting in for Jack Jamond. We thank you. The chair thanks you. Let me ask you.
Jack will get his rebuttal in the next program.
There hasn't been much said here about Pete Wilson. Did anyone mention Pete Wilson?
We don't mention Pete Wilson
because of the troubles in California.
Deep troubles, yes.
But if he could miraculously pull that out, he would be a candidate.
Both Wilson and Weld have to be reelected in '94, and they're both going to face tough fights.
I think the most interesting potential candidate, is William Weld. William Weld has a libertarian streak in him. And he has recently astonished both Massachusetts and the nation by his public advocacy of total gay rights, including the recognition of gay marriage. Did you see that? That happened in the last, month or so up in Massachusetts. He's way ahead of any other governor, Republican or Democratic or Independent, in any state in the Union.
I cannot believe that the Republican Party is ready to nominate somebody for President of the United States who is pro-abortion and pro-gay rights.
Well, there is a movement within the party now to move away from the cultural issues and into a more libertarian mode. Did you have you observed that?
There is a movement.
Plus, you have people saying, stay away from family values, stay away from Hillary Clinton, and indeed George Bush showed that this week in the way he congratulated Bill Clinton in certain areas. Can you speak to that?
Yes, of course.
The magic formula is economic conservatism and social tolerance, and that's where a Kemp-Weld ticket would be very good. And to quote Bill Weld, he says, "What skin is it off your back if somebody else is not discriminated against?" That's a very winning slogan.
What do you say to this?
But there are public policy impacts of that. For example, gays in the military. I mean, it is not just, I think people, look, the Republican Party...
Already are gays in the military.
Well, I mean, publicly professed. The Republican platform, the one that was allegedly, so right-wing, comes out in favor of tolerance,
we gotta get out.
In favor of diversity.
We got to get out. Who's going to be the 1996 Republican presidential nominee? I ask you, Ben Wattenbeetle.
Thank you, John McLaughlin. The answer is probably Kemp.
Eleanor.
I agree. If it's Phil Gramm, they're really in trouble.
Clarence.
Jack Kemp, no matter who wins this year.
Morton.
Jack Kemp.
The answer, William Weld. Issue 4, environmental engagement. Candidates Bush and Clinton are at odds over the environment. Mr. Bush claims credit for the Clean Air Act, a massive law which sets air quality standards for the country. Additionally, the president says that he has increased the budget for the Environmental Protection Agency. He's expanded wildlife protection through new national parks and new marine sanctuaries. The Clinton Gore ticket relies on Senator Gore for its environmental credential and strength. Mr. Gore has focused on environmental issues for most of his 16 years in Congress, where he is widely recognized as Capitol Hill's environmental enthusiast. Recently, the senator published a best-selling book on the environment called Earth in the Balance. Gore has gained praise for some solid environmental ideas, but he has also come under fire for environmental extremism. One assertion from his book is often cited, quote, "We must make the rescue of the environment the central organizing principle for civilization," unquote. The Economist magazine called the assertion a quote-unquote nutty idea. But the magazine also praises Senator Gore. Critics charge that the bulk of Gore's proposals, however, if enacted, would devastate U.S. business, and that would mean millions of lost jobs. Question. Will the environment be in the campaign big, and will it play better for the Republicans or for the Democrats? I ask you, Clarence Page.
Well, I think it plays better for the Democrats. 2 points about what you've just pointed out. Number one, the Al Gore quote is really taken out of context. I think Al Gore has a high amount of credibility on this issue, which helps Clinton. Number two, it is Clinton at the top of the ticket, and the Bush campaign is sending two messages. One, they're calling Clinton sluggish on the environment in his home state, and they're also calling him an environmental extremist. Which way do they want to have it?
Well,
I think he's really ahead on the issue.
In fact, the answer is both. That Bill Clinton has been a moderate on the environmental jobs issue, and has made a lot of compromises in Arkansas, and the water is pretty dirty. Meanwhile, Al Gore, who, by the way, does not have a long-standing environmental record. This is comparatively recent.
He was holding hearings on Earth warming in 1981.
Just a second. His big issue used to be nuclear war. I mean, he does have a sense for big issues. In any event, he does say that the internal combustion engine is the most immoral thing that's ever been invented.
And he wants to get rid of it.
Has to go out of existence. And that the auto industry is more dangerous to mankind than any enemy we've ever faced.
He's a visionary, Mort. He's looking ahead.
I want to hear from Ben. Quickly.
I think Senator Gore has drifted toward the extreme edge of the environmental movement. He wrote a book blurb endorsing the recent Paul Ehrlich book, which is a
on population or what?
Well, on population and the environment, which is a recipe for poverty in the United States. And I think ultimately this is going to be Dan Quayle's issue against Al Gore, and he's going to score with
please.
it.
Eleanor, you got 10 seconds.
First of all, Bill Clinton has not embraced all of Al Gore's proposals. And what you're going to see the Bush campaign try to tie extremism around the neck of the Democratic ticket. But young people who are leaving the Republican Party in droves are environmentalists. And being green this year is an asset.
Predictions. Ben.
The issue of values, the so-called social issue, which has been with us for 30 years under the guise of law and order, prayer, death penalty, drug, sexual revolution, draft dodging, crime, pornography, quotas, patriotism, gay and lesbian alternatives, family, female-headed households, etc., will return. George Bush, who is tone deaf on this issue so far, will figure out a way to link values and economics, and it will be a big issue in this campaign.
Will it propel Bush into the presidency?
Doubtful.
Right, I agree with the last
Quickly, Eleanor, quickly.
Okay, pitting jobs against the environment, the Bush campaign is about to make the California gnatcatcher bird as popular as the spotted owl.
Clarence.
Okay, Clinton campaign is going to embark on a big black voter registration drive in the cities, and which will provide the margin of victory for him in November.
Mort.
France will discombobulate Europe by voting no on the Maastricht Treaty at the end of September.
Boris Yeltsin will be ousted by January 1. Next week, an on-site report from Paris, capital of the nation that hates America most. Bye-bye.
The McLaughlin Group.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group. GE. From residential to commercial lighting, we bring good things to life.
For a transcript, send $5 to Federal News Service, 620 National Press Building, Washington, D.C., 20045. Specify program date. To obtain a free McLaughlin Group Viewer's Guide, write Viewer's Guide, Box 786, Madison Square Station, New York, New York, 10159. Topics are selected by Mr. McLaughlin.